The US climate envoy John Kerry has been holding discussions with his Chinese counterpart in Beijing as both countries seek to revive cooperation on tackling climate change. Chinese state media say John Kerry and Xie Zhenhua met for 4 hours as they attempted to make progress ahead of the UN climate summit in November. Talks between the two nations, the world's biggest polluters, broke down last year amid friction over Taiwan. As China continues to lead global carbon emissions, it's also experiencing record-breaking heat and extreme weather.
China, like the rest of the world, is heating up. This summer, temperatures in Beijing have surpassed 41 degrees Celsius. Last year, drought hit parts of the country hard, including in the southwest region of Chongqing. It was the worst drought in 60 years. This year, it was severe flooding that hit areas around Chongqing, causing major damage to infrastructure and to people's homes. According to UN figures, China is one of the world's most exposed countries to the impact of climate change. That's thanks to its population size and the number of environmental disasters. And yet it's the world's biggest carbon emitter. 3 years ago, President Xi Jinping promised China would be carbon neutral before 2060. To stress his commitment to renewable energy, a year later, he promised China would stop building coal-fired power plants. That didn't happen. In fact, this year, new ones have been approved as blackouts across the country continue to grow. China and the US have the world's largest economies. They're also the two biggest producers of CO2. Experts stress that if climate change is to be slowed down or even stopped, these two rival superpowers must work together before it's too late.
And joining us from Beijing is correspondent Fabian Kretschmer, who's been following the talks between China and the US. Tell us more about the talks and what you're hearing about any developments.
Yeah, Kerry began his talks this morning local time, and in his first meeting he met Xie Zhenhua, that's his Chinese counterpart. They met at the Beijing hotel here in the capital, and the meeting lasted for roughly 4 hours, which I think is a good sign. There are not too many details about the talks available, but we know that John Kerry has promised that he wants to pressure Beijing in terms of reducing CO2 emissions, and his talks will last until Wednesday.
It's amazing that these two are only talking for the first time in nearly a year, considering the urgency of the issues they're talking about. How important is this for the global fight against climate change?
Well, it's extremely important. I mean, China and the US, they're not only the biggest two economies of the world, they are also the two biggest polluters in terms of CO2 emissions. So it is important that they talk again. And last year, China has suspended climate talks with the US after Nancy Pelosi, the US politician, visited Taiwan. So definitely a good news that they're talking. And there's a second dimension to it. The US and China, I mean, the tensions are really rising extremely. And John Kerry is the third high-ranking US politician who visited Beijing only in a matter of a few weeks. So it goes to show that the two governments, they try to manage their differences in a more constructive way. They try to prevent further escalation, and they also try to open up new communications channels, which definitely is a good news.
And much of China has experienced record temperatures in recent weeks. How are the media there covering the heat waves, and especially China's role as the biggest carbon emitter in the world in contributing to a rapidly warming planet?
Well, I mean, the coverage is really very selective, especially by state media. They only put the emphasis on that China is, adding a lot of renewable energies every year. And of course, this is an amazing development, but they don't mention that China is also the biggest polluter and has a high reliance on coal and indeed is building a lot of new coal power plants. But I mean, just by looking at our everyday lives here, I mean, for Chinese, it is obvious that the extreme weathers in summer are having huge effects. And now we're experiencing the most severe heat wave in several decades. This is threatening the wheat production, the rice production, the energy security, and of course also has a lot of impact on the economic growth. So it is very clear that this extreme weather is threatening the development of the country, even though I would say that the official coverage is not very critical about it.
Journalist Fabian Kretschmer in Beijing.